because they take immediate offence and they start weeping and wailing and they run off to HR and say, I've been bullied, I can't stand it. You know, and that is an unfortunate place to be, because it will no doubt hinder the economic prosperity of this great country of ours eventually. Let's talk to Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, historian, broadcaster and Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, because we've got plenty to talk to him about, not least the situation with Diane Abbott, not least the migration situation, because he's come out with some very interesting stats over the course of the last few days. Also, the ridiculous story of a boy who posed as a 17-year-old who was in fact 42, former ISIS fighter, came to this country, had tattoos, had wrinkles, and was clearly a man with a receding hairline. But the Home Office thought he was a 17-year-old and so gave him special child status. Incredible. Rafe, a very good morning to you.
Good morning. Always a pleasure, Mike.
Nice to talk to you. Let's kick things off with this character, the ex-ISIS fighter, because even as we speak, no matter how many times Rishi Sunak says we're going to stop the boats, even though his last pronouncement on it was that he probably wasn't going to stop the boats, the people continue to come, and even more ridiculously, the Home Office continues to fail the public of this country on a daily basis, and this is a great example of it.
Yes, I mean, when I first read the story, I thought, my gosh, I need to know what moisturiser this man is using. You know, 42 years old, posing as a 17-year-old. But then, as you say, turns out he's got a receding hairline, fading tattoos because they're so old, clearly weather-worn. I mean, it's a complete mockery. You know, they did, you know, Migration Watch found out that of all of the disputes over age amongst people claiming to be under 18 migrants, 66% of those were upheld. There was over 1,000 people in 2022 who were actually over the age of 18 when they said that they were under. And remarkably, 50 migrants were over 30. So it's not just this chap. 50 migrants were over 30 years of age, and they're being placed. Not only does this actually cause a problem, I mean, it's absurd for the start that we have this situation, but firstly, of course, you've got adults actually being placed into foster care, which deprives the rights of young British people who really need this care, and they're now becoming a completely neglected segment of our population who aren't getting this treatment because you have these adults receiving all of that care. But also people are being placed into school systems, maybe not at the age of 42 like this chap is, but people who are in their 20s, perhaps even in their early 30s, are being placed in a school setting where, of course, they're free to do as they wish with a student population. They're influencing them, they're getting them into criminal activity on some occasions. We know from previous experiences that they're making sexual advances on underage children as well. I mean, it's an absolute scandal. And when, of course, we had a couple of years ago, quite rightly, a Tory MP said that we should actually have age checks by looking at their dental work, by doing x-rays to look at their teeth. Of course, we had the NGOs, we had the Asylum Aid Charity and others saying, oh, this would be re-traumatizing to these people. Give me a break.
Yes. I mean, it really is ludicrous. We've seen plenty of cases, haven't we, of kids who are not kids being placed in schools, but also being placed in foster care. I think I'm right in saying that the guy who ended up coming here from Afghanistan, who had murdered in Europe and who ended up murdering somebody down in Dorset, in Bournemouth, I think it was, or Poole, was he not housed with a family because they believed him to be under the age of 18?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, you know, when Norway insisted on having a dental examination on all arriving refugee children, they discovered that 9 out of 10 were, in fact, over 18. For some reason, we in this country are just unwilling to take what to most people would seem like a quite logical step. And I hope that one of the amendments that will come into this bill, and it is being pushed by some Tory MPs on the right, is to actually ensure that these age checks do become standard in this country, because it's a mockery.
Well, it's not just the age checks, it's the fact that every single person seemingly involved in the process and the processing, as much as it goes on, is almost employed because they take everything at face value. You know, if you come to this country and say, I'm 18, or I'm 28, or I'm 8, it seems as though that's to be believed no matter what. And if you haven't committed, you know, have you committed any crimes? No. That's fine then. You know, have you got a criminal record? No. Have you been in ISIS? No. Are you in danger of being tortured if you go home? Yes. Oh, well, you better stay here. It's like that nobody's got any kind of critical faculty anymore.
Yes, well, I mean, this 42-year-old, weather-beaten, tattooed, was housed for over a week before they actually did any tests. A week? Why is he there for even 5 minutes? It should be quite clear. On your bike, mate, you're clearly lying. It's a complete nonsense. But of course, it's fueled, of course, by the NGOs and the asylum charities, who, of course, their intent is to delay the process, have every legal option available to these people, even though it's obvious to everybody that they're actually milking the system. We have to actually find some way to ensure, well, Braverman's trying her best, but she's even being thwarted by her own left wing of the Tory party, who seem to be completely out of touch, not only with their voter base, but with in fact, most of the population. You know, Braverman said that 2 in 1 Britons support this legislation, and with an election looming, you're sort of wondering why these MPs don't realise that they're facing obliteration if they don't pull their socks up.
Well, I might be able to help you there, because I've got a story here in front of me which is with some regard to 3 Conservative MPs who have criticised aspects of the government's asylum policy. This was in the Sunday Telegraph yesterday. The 3 of them have received more than £160,000 in services and research support from the Refugee Asylum and Migration Policy Project, which is one of these, you know, lefty pro-refugee organisations called RAMP. Basically, they paid Caroline Noakes £52,390. David Simmons has received money from them as well. And Simon Fell, all of whom have been against government policy and have supported, basically, the knocking back of the legislation.
Well, dare I say, you know, all this does, it reveals once again that a huge number of Tory MPs aren't actually traditional Conservatives. They are liberal. They're liberals who join the Tory party because their prime concern is neoliberal free market economics, not doing what Conservatives are supposed to do, and that's to conserve our borders, conserve our culture, conserve our communities, and conserve our way of life. And we saw this, you know, with Liz Truss, of course. Liz Truss, formerly a Lib Dem, became the Tory Prime Minister. And what did she want to do? She wanted to open the borders for immigration to fuel the economy. Completely out of touch. There is a big schism developing, or has already developed, between the Tory party members of Parliament and between the Tory grassroots, a lot of whom are now small C social conservatives who used to be former Labour voters, who believe actually in belonging to communities. And basically, I think if there's not a solution to this at the next general election, the Tory party will be done for.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And just to go back to our friend from ISIS who thought that he could convince everyone that he was under 18, he's now in a taxpayer-funded hotel, would you believe, while he awaits an appeal for his deportation to come through. And he now says he needs NHS treatment for depression.
Yes, well, of course, you remember full well the story Theresa May highlighted about, was it someone being deprived of their cats? Or having a cat being an essential requirement to sit.
That's right.
There are so many of these things that are around. This bill that's coming forward, I think, is a very sensible bill. This is all about creating the sense of a hostile environment. And the problem that we have now is that the reforms that are trying to be implemented by the left wing of the Labour Party, of the Tory party, are undermining the essential essence of this bill, which is to scare people from coming over to this country. And if they know they can say silly things like, I need NHS treatment for depression and so forth to stay in this country, that's not going to act as any deterrent whatsoever.
No, it really isn't. I mean, it reminds me of the old joke my father used to tell about the guy who murdered his parents and then asked for leniency on the grounds that he was an orphan when he was before the judge. Let's talk about your rather interesting statistical framework that you put out about the numbers of people coming here from abroad, people in this country who were born abroad. According to your tweet, I know it's been there for a while, 42% of the 10 million foreign-born residents in England arrived in the last decade.
That's right. So this is all the results that we've had from the last census results and so forth, and it's quite unprecedented. You know, I yesterday and over the weekend rather, the New Culture Forum, which is the think tank to which I belong, had a big conference in Birmingham dealing with various issues. And I gave a speech on this very point of migration. You know, in the last 25 years, since New Labour came to power in 97, to 26 years, we've had more immigration to this country in those 26 years than in the last 2,000 years combined. That's an astonishing thing to contemplate. You know, when people say quite rightly that Britain has always been welcoming to overseas immigrants coming in and refugees, which is a good thing to celebrate, people mention the Idi Amin Ugandan refugees who fled here after being expelled from Uganda. And that was a hugely controversial number of people who came in the 70s, if you remember.
I do.
Now that number was 27,000 people. We get 27,000 people coming here every 10 days now.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that, right? So this is completely without precedent. The idea that Britain's always been a nation of immigrants is a complete myth. You know, in 1851, it was around 0.5% of the population were born abroad. By 1901, it was about 1.5%. 1951, it was about 4.5%.
Yeah.
But that shows that it took 100 years to go up by 4%. Then it took 50 years. Every 10 years now, the population born abroad is increasing by 4%. It's now at 16.6% of the population, completely without precedent. Under the Romans, it was only about 3%. Under the Vikings, it was about 5%. But for the last 1,000 years, it's never really been above 0.5 or 1%. And no society can actually sustain such rapid demographic shift because communities have no incentive to assimilate and integrate if they're arriving to this country.
Yes.
And there are pre-built, pre-established, segregated communities with their own shops, their own languages, their own cultural institutions. And of course, we now well know that there are schools, for example, in the north of England and elsewhere, from Bradford to Burnley and so forth, where students actually believe that being Asians are the majority population of the country.
Yes.
Because that's all that they see around them. And of course, they go home to their parents and all they see are the television programs by satellite from their home countries.
Yes.
So they have no exposure to British culture, to British values. And what we do know from that on the most extreme side is because of that, we are having the perpetuation of cultural practices that we would find abhorrent in this country normally, you know, be it female genital mutilation, be it honor killings, be it acid attack rises. You know, there's a big rise, we're often told by the BBC, in misogyny, in homophobia, in anti-Semitism, but no one ever actually wants to ask why that is the case. It's the great elephant in the room.
It really is. And one final thought I'll leave you with. 60 people have been arrested during a week-long crackdown on illegal working by delivery drivers working for companies including Deliveroo, Just Eat and Uber Eats. I don't think anyone would be surprised by this. 44 were detained by the Home Office pending their removal from the UK. The remaining 16 were released on bail. You know, you do wonder where all these people are coming from, and you do wonder what they're doing when they get here. Well, there's your answer.
Yes, well, a French politician a couple of years ago said it's not rocket science. If you want to stop people coming over from France, you have to make Britain less attractive than France is.
Yes.
And one of the ways that we're more attractive is that the French clamp down on black market employment far more than we do here.
Yeah.
We're far more lenient. And if you want to really stop a huge portion of the immigrants who are coming over here across the channel, you have to actually penalize the employers and penalize the landlords who don't do the necessary background checks. If you're not actually penalizing people who are employing and housing these people, then you're going to have the flow continue unfettered and unchecked.
Exactly right. Rafe, good to talk to you. Thanks very much. We've got to run. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, historian, broadcaster, fascinating guy, senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, of course, as well.